What's up, guys? Welcome to Demo with Mo. I'm your host, Monique Simmons. We'll be discussing dating, engaged, and married objectives from a young Christian's perspective. Are you guys ready? Let's dive in. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of Demo with Mo. I am your host, Monique Simmons, and today we will be discussing all things mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today I have invited a guest to join me. I have Miss Emily Cox here. Emily Cox is a licensed clinical mental health counselor as well as a licensed clinical addiction specialist. Emily is a neurodivergent therapist who loves supporting people move past barriers and find their strengths through creativity and connection. She incorporates expressive art techniques to supplement traditional client-centered talk therapy, helping ease the way. Let's welcome Miss Emily Cox. Emily, I'm so glad to have you join us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here today with you.
Thank you. Emily, I usually start off with a fun fact or something interesting so my guests can get to know you a little better.
Mm-hmm.
The question I have here for you, when you're not working, what do you do in your free time for fun?
Ooh, excellent question. Well, the boring answer is I live in the mountains, so I say hiking, which is like when you're in the mountains surrounded by outdoorsy people, like that's not unique. Everyone goes hiking, but like
Yeah.
they're very pretty. The other thing I like to do is like trying new adventurous eating spots and eating things. I love yummy things. So I also this is how I know I'm aging in a good way of like sometimes there's exciting things in the grocery store. So like they have Old Bay flavored goldfish. And like I'm a little bit obsessed with Old Bay, like the seasoning you put on like crab and shrimp, like I'll put it
Yeah.
on everything. So I was like, goldfish, sign me up. I am good. So in my free time, we are hiking, we are gardening, we are discovering exciting new treats to eat.
I love all of those so much. Like, I love all of those so much. And it's funny because one of yours is one of my fun things. I love trying new foods. That's one of my hobbies. So I'm with you.
Okay. Especially when
I'm
you find like a new obsession. So not
yeah.
like sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're gross, but when you're like, yes, I didn't know this existed, and now it's like part of my world.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the best part of it. That's the best
Mhm.
part of it. Okay. So my first question here, which is more about you, because I love to know a little bit more about you.
Mhm.
How did you or what made you get into the mental health field?
Oh, that is an excellent question. It is also kind of a typical answer. So a lot of people either get into mental health field through like, I know when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a rocket scientist. I'm going to talk to people and help them. I was not one of those. Another main like gateway into mental health world is like having personal experience with it through like
Yeah.
your own therapy or your own mental health stuff, or that we can be in communities or in families or in social groups where like no one is really having mental health struggles, which in some ways can be a beautiful thing. But then when we're the ones having ones, like we kind of get to be pioneers of like, ooh, I guess I'm figuring this out, or like, ooh, I can't do this on my own anymore. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my pathway into it of like really great experiences with therapy and therapists at really like transformational points of my life. And then being like, well, this was really helpful and like life changing and developing. Like, is this something that I might be interested in doing? So it kind of led me down that path. I also like tripped and stumbled into the whole child world thing. Like, when I started my graduate school education, I was like, children are gross, they are sticky, I want nothing to do with them. Like, they should be in schools and have no things. And then I had a internship experience where like you didn't get to pick, like whoever came through the door is what you got, which is the best way to get experience of like you just figure it out under supervision, under people. But like working with kids in therapy is actually really fun, and like I really enjoy doing it, and it was really a wonderful experience. So that's kind of how I got drawn to the mental health field, and then with like kids and teens specifically.
And I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't speak about that in your introduction. So, can you tell from our audience, like exactly what you specialize in?
Totally. So I say it kind of like tweens, teens, young adults. So kind of like 27 and under is my like happy spot. So I like them when they're like middle schooler, kind of not quite like baby age, but still figuring out who they are. And then the teenagers, the spicier the better. Like the more miserable we're hating stuff. I really love working with them. I think they're really fun. Even when they're like really passionate and stressed and having big feelings. Like I like working with those big feelings. And then the young adult piece is kind of we've figured out life to a certain extent, or like we've done things a certain way, and then all of a sudden, like, ooh, this was not what I was expecting it being, or like I'm in a new place and all of my friends aren't texting me back, or I have tried doing this thing for so long and all of a sudden all the things I've always done aren't working anymore. Who am I? What do I want? My relationship I've had since high school has ended, and now I'm in my mid 20s and need to go on a first date. What is that like? So, those are the three main areas that I just like love working with of like big transitions, big identity pieces, and big like opportunities for growth.
I love that so much. And I'm sure, and I'm not sure, I don't know. I hope you hear that a lot from people that they love that because most people stay away from those kind of teens, from those
Mhm.
kind of kids, especially like the quote unquote troubled kids. They
Mhm.
kind of stay away from it. They want to deal with the easier kids, the one that don't cause trouble, the ones that don't make you uncomfortable, the ones that are easier to get along with. That's who you kind of more want to deal with just because it's easier. So I was very drawn to you when I was reading your website and researching about you and how you were specializing in those tweens and teens. And I was very drawn to you because um, I work in ministry and I'm a Sunday school teacher and I teach teenagers.
Mhm.
And it's something that I have a heart for. And most people don't want to deal with teenagers and young people. You really have to have a heart for that because they're not always easy.
Right.
And it's just, you really stood out to me because again, I feel like it's something that you really have to have a heart for. So the fact that that's something that you really desire and want to do really made me want to talk to you and just to ask you so many questions and to really dive in this conversation with you. So I'm really excited to talk to you because that's not something that people really want to do. You know, again, it's something that you really have to have a heart for and desire to do because that's not everybody's ministry per se.
Totally. It's not
it,
everyone's cup of tea. It's like a
no,
calling, right? Of
you
like
know,
some people too expect children to like have, angel wings and halos and they're just precious pieces of fluff that all they want to do is like cuddle and make you coloring pages. There are definitely some kids like that and they're delightful, but that is not the like breadth and like encompasses all of the great spectrum of all the different kinds of kids that exist. So I
no,
think it can be challenging. Like there are definitely some challenges to it, but also like with the little kids, we talk about like behaviors communication. So even when they're screaming or tantruming or throwing things or breaking things down, that like they're communicating something. There's
yeah,
some need not met through all of the spiciness or the disgruntledness or the frustratedness or the yelling at mom and I hate you and I never want to see you again. Like that's also communicating something.
yeah.
It's communicating a lot within the system. It's also communicating a lot about the internal world. So that's something that I'm really drawn to about teens, young adults, and like tweens of that, like, okay, I am not a child, but like I still am. Like I'm not a little. I don't have recess anymore. I can't play on the playground. Who am I? What do I do? What's going on here?
Okay. So for someone who is interested in therapy but not sure exactly where to start,
Mhm.
can you explain like some of the different types of therapy, talk therapy, EMDR, EFT, etc.? How can they decide which may be a better fit for them?
Totally. Excellent question. I think too, like it can be really overwhelming. Sometimes it goes into
Yes.
like it's almost a different language. Sometimes too, like by the time we're seeking therapy, we're already overwhelmed. Like we've already been kind of struggling, maybe white knuckling it a little bit. So by the time we're like, ooh, I actually need help with this, or like I have been trying all these things on my own. I've been doing the yoga, I've been doing the meditation, I've been doing the walks on my own, and like it still can't cut, it ain't cutting it. So it's more of like by the time we get to the point that we are vulnerable and strong and brave enough to ask for help, then like, where do I go?
Yeah.
Like, how do I even do? Everyone has all these letters after their name. I don't know the difference. And how do you tell? And sometimes all the profiles look for the same. I had someone the other day mention they're like, it's just like online dating, but therapist. And like everyone's faces are looking at me and I just can't. There's hundreds of them and I can't do. So acknowledgement that like it is overwhelming. It is an overwhelming process. There are many roads to get to what we need. So it's not like you're taking the wrong path. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So the kind of framing in terms of like how to get help between the different kinds, what's going to be best for us is kind of like um, thinking of what people kind of specialize in or like advertise that they do. Some of that can be through the different types of therapy. So some people really like doing traditional talk therapy. That means basically what you see in movies, TV, TikTok of like two people sitting in a room or sitting on Zoom of like sitting, talking to each other, we're verbalizing, we're talking about our symptoms, we're doing an assessment, we're making a treatment plan, we're talking out what's going on, and through weekly meetings, every other weekly meetings, we're kind of checking in on things are happening, we're working our treatment plan to kind of address whatever we're addressing in the process. Through talk therapy, there can be a lot of interventions underneath that like big umbrella. So like a really popular one is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's really frequently used with like depression, anxiety, things like that. We're connecting our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions and how they all talk to each other and like reframing kind of the process between those three things. Some people really love that. Some people have a really hard time with CBT because sometimes it can feel like a little stifling or like limiting in some way, or it's really focused on our cognitions. Some people really love the structure around that of like, cool, like I can recenter my thoughts, I can reframe how I'm thinking, like I have power in this, I have autonomy in this. Some people are like, I have so many thoughts already. Now I have to talk myself out of this. I feel like I'm gaslighting myself into thinking that it's different. So there's no good or bad. It's just what works for us and what doesn't work for us. So it kind of is tied into that of like whatever we're seeking support or help for, kind of thinking about what is going to be a helpful path for us. So if we're really struggling with depression symptoms, if we have a hard time getting out of bed, if we're going to work every day, but it feels like kind of gray, kind of we're not getting pleasure out of things that we used to get pleasure out of, the things that we're hitting aren't hitting anymore, that's kind of like, would CBT be helpful for me? Would talk therapy be helpful for me? If we have a lot of trauma history, if we have some really scary things happen that we're struggling with some trauma symptoms currently that are connected to those scary things, something like an EMDR, I'm always going to forget it. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Got it that time. That is more like a kind of body based, but also like a trauma specific reprocessing technique that can help identify that. EMDR can be helpful for a lot of things, but like if we're really struggling with life transitions or relationship stuff with our partner, is the EMDR going to be the best thing to fit that need? Maybe, maybe not, kind of up to us. But kind of thinking through what's going to be helpful. Then, kind of once we have those pieces, I tell people too to think about it of like, what would be good questions to ask someone that you're looking to start therapy with? Therapy is relationally based, so it's like kind of connecting with a relationship.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we're like, please take me on, please let me have an intake, please let me start with you. But also it's important to like us to feel like strong and validated to ask questions and like feel good from the client end of things. So not just like, do you have openings? Can we start immediately? But like, what is your theoretical orientation? What kind of therapy do you specialize in? What kind of stuff do you love supporting people with? Is there anything that you would think of referring out for, connecting me to a different therapist? Is there anything that is on your rule out list that you don't work with? A lot of people have active substance use on their rule out list. A lot of people will have current suicidal ideation, current self-harm on their rule out list, just for, various reasons for each therapist. But if you're thinking through like the questions of, I'm trying to figure out this person might be a good fit for me, those are some good places to might be helpful to start.
That's great information. Thank you. That's
Mhm.
really great information to think about. Okay, with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, what things regarding our mental health do you think we should be talking about or discussing more? Like, what things do you think we're not talking about that you think we should be talking about or we're not talking about enough?
Oh, that is such a good question. I should have more visibility for mental health month. I mean, my easy go-to is social media. I say that with a lot of like caveats just because it's so present. I also
Yeah,
think it's so present in our lives. It's so present in like younger and younger children's lives. Um, and that social media specifically, but also like the internet as a whole, and kind of like safety and connection and involvement around both of those things. In some ways, like how they can be harmful or disruptive or challenging, in some ways, how they can be really helpful and community building and resource building and connection points. I think that's a big one of just like how it interferes. A thing with social media too is like sometimes I reflect with people of like, as an adult with an adult brain with like a fully formed frontal lobe, like think of how like enthralling and addicting Instagram or social media can be, of like it's so hard to put it down. It can be so hard to step
yeah,
away. Now think about that as like a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old or a thing. So it's not about like demonizing it or being like, it's the worst ever, no one should ever touch it. Because like Pandora's box is open, it's in our world. But how do we interact with it? How do we manage it? How do we navigate that? And then how do we teach those tools to others in ways that are going to be helpful to us? Because one piece I find it to be really challenging, with like teens specifically, is that the peer conflict or peer influence piece, like it doesn't turn off because it's all online. So it used to be like you go to school, someone says something horrible about your outfit, or someone is spreading a rumor about you at school. It is awful and terrible and no fun to like people talking behind your back and people are giggling in the hallway. But like, you go home and then you do something. Now, like
yeah,
you can have the Snapchat, the notifications and the messages going constantly. Everything's going on in the Instagram group chat. So it's harder to have distance from it because it's so present, and then can be more challenging to teach the like helpful skills around it because is so present. So it's not like the most specifically relevant mental health piece, but I think like how we engage with like social media and the internet around like development and mental health challenges specifically. Here's a specific example of like mental health challenges. So like if people are Googling and looking up on Instagram, like depression or like self-harm or suicide, sometimes they're going to get resources, sometimes they're going to get really helpful stuff, sometimes they're going to get pictures of self-harm, which is like not great for people who are having those thoughts. So it's kind of that like double-edged impact of it, of like for all the good it can do and how helpful it can be and how it can be a beautiful like resource and sense of community, of like how it can also open the doors to other things that like we as a society just don't have control over and won't ever have control over. It's all algorithms.
wow. That's such a great example. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't even thought about that. But you saying it, it makes so much sense. But just in conversation, I wouldn't even thought to say social media. And I don't even know why I wouldn't have thought of that, but I wouldn't even thought to say social media. But it's such a great example. Even as adults.
Mhm. Well, same thing.
Okay.
Like I did the peer stuff with the teens. It happens with adults too, though. Like one of my number one referrals for sources is like people being bridesmaids at weddings, or like drama is going down because friend is getting married. The amount of drama and the amount of, but also like conflict and sadness and turmoil that it brings around weddings, around women specifically, is like really overwhelming and can be really upsetting for people. But like same thing with the social media piece of it, of like now all these other voices are involved. So like the
Yeah.
friend group can get so fractured and so intense, and the bride is dealing with all the things the bride is dealing with, that like it creates all of this intensity and discord that then isn't just like shut off.
Yeah. And then it, like you said, it anything that happens because of social media, it gets bigger because
Mhm.
of social media. Because now everybody takes everything, and it doesn't matter what it is, friendship, relationship, things at school, on your job. It now doesn't just stay there. It's now somebody goes and posts it on social media. Everybody has an opinion about it. So yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
You're so right. You're so right. You see it being played out every day,
Mhm.
literally every day. Okay. There are so many stigmas around therapy, especially in the community of color.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? And do you personally have any clients who are people of color or people who come from a background where therapy would have been seen as a stigma?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think the stigmas around mental health, specifically with community of color, like have been pretty well founded, and that like a lot of the medical field and the mental health field has like done active harm against
Yeah.
communities of color. Like the field of social work was founded on white women taking away children from communities of color. Like that is a fact, not to be debatable. Like that's just how it is. So it's totally understandable then that like there is lasting stigma or lasting concern or anxiety when your
Yeah.
only interaction or exposure to like a certain field is people coming in and taking children away, people coming in and sending you away to be incarcerated, people coming in and then you're involved in the legal system that you've had zero interaction with. Like that amount of harm and prejudice that has existed and has persisted throughout the history of mental health field and then all the different levels of mental health field and the overlap between mental health and physical health, like totally understandable of why these things consist and why these things are happening. It's not just from nowhere, just like I'm not sure, like actual harm has happened, real lasting, also current harm can still happen. So it's not like woohoo, it's 2024 and it's resolved. Like no, it continues, it
Right.
persists. So understandable of why the stigma exists, understandable totally why these like hesitations and valid concerns are present. So in terms of like connecting or like kind of bridging those gaps or allowing like spaces for those conversations to happen, because sometimes the healing isn't just like let's slap a band-aid on it and get over it, but like we need to have the space for that hurt to be. We need to have the space for those conversations to happen and not just like I wasn't there, I didn't do it, so therefore it's none of my responsibility. Like no, it's everyone's responsibility to have like continued change and growth happen.
Yeah.
um so in previous experience with like clients of communities of color, it's kind of opening those conversations and opening that piece of safety. A huge piece in the therapeutic space is just like making a safe space. So it is making a safe space to try things, making a safe space for mistakes to happen, making a safe space for us to have successes, for us to have failures if it needs to happen. That is for like the client primarily. Sometimes it can be for the therapist too, of like if mistakes happen, if harm happens, that there is space for repair. So it's not just like you got your feelings hurt, you can't say anything about it, we're moving on because I'm in charge and I'm saying what's happening. Like that's a real uncomfy power dynamic that doesn't seem to be very collaborative at all. So more of like openness for conversation, openness for feedback, and then openness for collaboration and like growth from all sides. And that like, hey, like this is really uncomfy, or like we never talked about this in my family because it was a really scary topic, or I'm the first person in my family to ever do therapy. I don't know what any of this stuff is. You're saying lots of acronyms. I don't know what any of them are. So having the space to have the open conversations and support people through them rather than just like having more barriers that exist that can be more challenging.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that response and that answer. Um, thank you. It's just so much I could say, but thank you. Um, My therapist is a white woman,
Mhm.
and she has always made me feel safe. And I never even felt uncomfortable. It never even crossed my mind that, how do I say this? Like going into her office, I never once, because she always made me feel so safe. It never crossed my mind that this is a white woman and I'm
Mhm.
a black woman and I needed to feel guarded, or I just never felt that way. And I'm sure that is a lot of people's experience, and people of color purposefully want to see a person of color because of the stigmas and because of things done in the past, and rightfully so. But when I was looking for a therapist, I specifically wanted someone who specialized in EFT, emotionally focused therapy. Like that was my
Mhm.
main goal because of my own history. I had in the past done talk centered therapy, and that wasn't working for me
Mhm.
anymore. I I had just kind of hit the ceiling, and I needed someone who with doing research and different things. I knew specifically what I was looking for, so that was my main goal of needing someone who specialized in EFT, and she was the only one in our area who specialized in EFT. So that was, it wasn't that I didn't want to see someone of color or I did. It was just EFT was my main goal, and that was the only thing that I was focused on. So she was the only person in my area who specialized in EFT. And when I found her, it didn't even cross my mind that she was a white woman. It just crossed my mind she specialized in EFT, and this is what I need right now for what I was going through in my life.
Mhm.
And I got there, and she was amazing. She was amazing. She always made me feel safe, felt heard, felt seen. And every time in each session, she always said, I just want you to know, I want you to know I see you and I hear you and all of those things. Like she always made sure to say certain things and reminded me, I know this may not be easy. Sometimes in my session, like she would slip it in there, like, I know this may not be easy, because I hear from different people, different clients, it may be hard being a person from color. Because she's like, I know I'm a white woman. I
Mhm.
don't ever want you to feel unsafe here because I know I'm a white woman. Like she wouldn't ever try to make it like she didn't know who she was,
Right.
being that I
Or just
was
like ignore that fact of like,
right.
we're
Like
just
that's what
sitting
I
here.
mean.
Like,
Like hearing you
we're
say what
colorblind
you're
and we're
saying,
just humans.
she
Like,
wasn't trying
no.
to pretend like she didn't know who she was to have this
Right.
black woman sit across from me, and you could see all these black people in town, and
Mhm.
you chose to come see this white woman. I know who I am, and I know this may not be easy for you to come here and spill your soul to me. I
Mhm.
know who I am, and it was just like that never crossed my mind though.
Mhm.
You just made me feel safe. That was it. I
Right.
just wanted someone who made me feel safe, who made me feel seen, and you've always done that. So
Mhm.
thank you. I'm saying all this to say thank you for what you're saying, because in your response, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Like you're in your response, that's what's needed
Mhm.
to help take the stigma away, to help people feel safe and be open to going to therapy and seeing someone and talking to someone, just to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel heard.
Right.
That's it.
When you bring up this beautiful point of like safety is key to therapy. Like if we're not feeling safe with our therapist or in the therapy space, like who wants to be vulnerable and spill our soul or spill our guts if we're like, this person's judging me. They're writing down all my thoughts and they're gonna go type it up and oh no, how's it gonna like that's not gonna be fun for anybody. But like it is a beautiful thing when that safety is achieved. And you bring up a good point too of like sometimes we're seeking like avatars of ourselves of like this person reflects me or this person connects with me or this but like they may be really similar to us, they may be the best fit for us, they also may not be. So it's important for people to like have options and have choice and not just be like cool, there's two people, I choose A or B and that's all for me. Like that's not a real choice, that's not sufficient for anybody. But then to also have the openness of like
Right.
I'm really seeking EFT, I want a seasoned EFT person I really want someone who can guide me in all of the EFT process and like dig down into my stuff with this. If it happens to be this person who's the best fit for me, who has the skills to create that safe space for me, then like great, we can have that connection point and we can be able to have the like growth and progress that happens in therapy.
Right. That that right there. That right there. If it would have happened to be a black man or woman who was specializing in EFT,
Mhm.
great.
Right.
But if it happened to be this young white woman who wears a smile all the time, who
Mhm.
specializes in EFT, so be it as well.
Mhm.
Okay. So my audience is mostly couples and families.
Mhm.
If one partner or spouse is struggling with mental illness, for example, anxiety or depression, or maybe the child is, how can that other partner or spouse or that parent support them?
Great question. I think sometimes, excellent questions. Sometimes we lash out on the people we feel safest with, or sometimes we show our worst versions of ourselves with the people we feel safest with. So sometimes this shows up in couples or it shows up in families of like the most obvious example is like little ones tantruming, like they're angels for dad and they're throwing cups at mom. But it's like they feel super safe with mom. That's not saying that they don't feel safe with dad, but mom's like, why am I the target? Like, why doesn't dad
Yeah.
get cups thrown at them? This isn't fair. And little kid brain, they're like, mom is going to take care of me. Mom is going to pick me up. Mom is going to, make sure I'm fed and all the things and have the sleep and have all the basic needs met. Like, I can throw cups at mom and mom is still going to love me. So it can show up in couples of like, sometimes they can pick up on things before we're aware of it. So, like, they can see kind of our sharpest edges before we know that they're pricking others. So, that can be a helpful like gauge in terms of like, would therapy be helpful? Or like, is extra support needed at this time? It doesn't necessarily have to be therapy. It could be connecting with community, connecting with religious community, connecting with friends. Like, it could be a myriad of things before we get to therapy, but just being like, something is up. Or like things are harder than they used to be. Things are more irritating than they used to be. With men and sometimes with kids, like depression doesn't just show up as sobbing all the time. It shows up as like anger, irritability. We're snappy. We have a way shorter fuse. Everything's getting on our nerves all the time. That can be depression, but it just shows up in a different way that isn't just like someone crying in a bathtub. So that our partners and our families being really helpful, like resources for us, and then also like guides of what is happening that we might not be able to see. Like you can't see the label when you're in the bottle, right? So like those really important areas of perspective of being like, hi, you're biting my head off every day. I love you and support you. Also, I don't love having my head being bitten off. Or like, hey, we are really good at this and now we're like really backsliding with trying to think of an example, like leaving the towels on the floor of like it's not about the towels, it's about like are we able to follow through with things, are we listening, are we contributing to family stuff, do we feel like we are being heard in a relationship. So it's that kind of stuff of like that they can be helpful perspective takers and helpful like reflections of what's going on. They also can be great resources of like, okay, we can have that vulnerability and openness to have those really hard conversations of like, you're right, something's wrong. I don't know what it is. I feel different. I can't put into words what that different is. Okay, I may need help. I have no idea what I need help with. So like those can be really hard conversations that can happen within the relationship or the family unit. Then the next piece of like action steps is like they can be helpful guides of like, okay, can you look? Here's 30 people. I do not have the brain space to like look through all 30 of these people. Can you go through them with me? Or like, I don't really know. I've never done this before. I don't know what I can want. That like our partner knows us really well. Our family knows us really well. So knowing of like, I don't really know if that person's going to be like great for us. They really want to do like this kind of stuff. Like that person is really directive and they do a lot of therapy homework and they want you to do a lot. Like we seem to be demand avoidant and that might be really challenging for us. Like may not be the best fit. The person may be wonderful and amazing and like the most incredible clinician ever, but they may not be the best fit for our needs. So helpful through all along the process, and then helpful of like guiding us through the process. And then too, like some of the best part, I don't do couples anymore, but like the best goal of couples therapy is to like get the couple to bitch about me on the way home. Like that is, you are connecting, you are talking, even if you're talking about how crazy I am and how I made you do silly stuff and how I'm useless and don't do anything, of like, if you can complain about me in the car ride home, we're having a conversation together. We are finding points of connection. Hooray. So it's that kind of piece of like, even when we're in the treatment process, it can be those helpful guideposts.
Those are great points. Really great points. Okay. How can people open up? Because I see this a lot and I hear about this a lot. How can people open up to their loved ones, whether it's family or friends, or maybe even somebody they're dating? How can people open up to their loved ones about mental health without feeling shame around the topic?
That can be so tough. Well, part of opening up too is like the vulnerability piece. It's letting people see our soft white underbelly. It's letting people see our squishy, icky insides without this like hard shell around it. The big fear and anxiety around vulnerability can be like, what if someone kicks me? Like, what if someone rejects me? What if someone hurts me? I open up, I put down all my shields of armor, and I'm ooey gooey, and then someone steps on me. Like, never putting those shields of armor down again. So, in terms of like the vulnerability of like something is wrong, or I need help. I need help is the harder one. Like, just saying those words takes a huge amount of bravery and like a huge amount of strength to just have the acknowledgement of that is like a huge piece. In terms of connecting with like vulnerability around mental health specifically, is like not only are we having that anxiety or hesitation with like, see all of my gooey parts, see all of my parts that I think are gross or rotten or unacceptable or unlovable. Let me tell you all about them now. Like that can sound like really not fun to a lot of people. And then let me go tell a stranger that I've never met before. Like that can be really not fun and overwhelming. But that like the piece of it is the stigma and the shame that comes along with it of like, I shouldn't be telling you this. These are inside. These should be kept in the inside thoughts. They shouldn't come outside. I can't let people know that I'm not perfect because then they won't love me. Then they won't accept me. Then they won't tolerate me. So all of those are like not rational thoughts, but they are kind of cognitions or things that we tell ourselves sometimes when we are struggling with that shame piece. Because the shame has a really hard time coming into the light. That's not where it lives. That's not where it wants to be. So anything we make moving towards the light, the shame is going to be like, no, no, stay in the dark. Put all those shields of armor back on. Put all your things on. Like, you don't need to be ooey gooey ever. We're going to be just fine as we are. The thing is, when we reflect of like, but are we just fine? Is this working for us? Is this shell cozy? Or is this shell combining? And I want a different shell. I want to be in a shell. I want a bigger shell. Whatever shell you want to be. So like having the space and the support and the awareness around the vulnerability pieces, and then also the like awareness of the shame pieces and how they're responding to be protective. They're trying to do their job, right? Of like, I'm trying to keep you safe. Sometimes they go into overdrive and like it's not safety, it's constriction.
Ooh. I hope that helps some people. I really hope that helps some people. Okay, so when selecting a therapist, what things should people look for to know if someone is a good fit for them? And what things do you consider to be like, I hate to even call it this, but what things do you consider to be red flags? Like, stay away. Keep looking.
I keep looking right at my field for a second. So I keep feeling I'm talking like vague and generalities of like what's going to be the best fit for you, but like it really is true. But like I'll try to think of it. Like say we're really struggling with I don't know, like anxiety or perfectionism. We don't have to put the
Okay.
label perfectionism on it, but just like I feel like everything is falling apart, everything's on fire all the time. My brain is never shuts off, and I feel like everything's on fire, and I hate it, and I don't want to feel this way anymore. Main
Okay.
thing. Okay. We want to go to therapy. We don't want to feel this way anymore. Great. We may have zero experience. So when someone's like, hey, what has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? We don't know. We haven't done it before. How do we know? Um, so, some paths we could take are like the cognitive behavioral therapy path, really directive, really kind of giving homework and then doing things in response. That might be a great fit for us. We might not be interested in that. So we might be like, I kind of just want like talk therapy. I just want to talk to someone. I don't really know if I have anything like strongly identified. I'm not like, I want to target this one thing that happened in eighth grade. Like, I kind of just want to talk out my problems and like have a space where I can do that. That would be someone just, could be a lot of people that could do like talk therapy. Sometimes it's client centered. It's also called person centered, where it's also called Rogerian because we like to have 12 terms for the same thing. That it's more of like a conversation, collaborative. It's giving a lot of power with the client. So instead of it being like didactic, like teacher style, I'm telling you how to fix your anxiety, it's like talking about anxiety together and talking through like what the strengths are and what the resources are to like get support. So you could put that into like Google is one way. Google can get really overwhelming. Another way I usually recommend is Psychology Today. It's a terrible magazine, but the website has a therapist directory that is actually super helpful. That like you can look through zip code, you can look through type of insurance, you can go through like I don't think it's called area of concern. Basically, what you want to feel better about. So, anxiety, life transitions, relationship stuff. You can click that as all of your like modifiers for your search, and it kind of narrows it down. So then you'll get like a whole bunch of profiles, and you're like, well, how do I go from there? So potential red flags. Sometimes a lot of the profiles, like if you click on it, like they'll click everything. That there's like 20 things that they cover. It's harder to feel like comfortable moving forward with that because you're like, well, if you do everything, like, how can you do my thing? Like you were talking earlier, Monique, of like, we really want EFT. If someone's like, I do EFT and I do ERP and I do EMDR and I do art and I do this and I do, it's like, okay, well, what, it can just get really overwhelming. So that can be one of them is like, if you're specialized in everything, then are you specialized in anything? Of like, okay, this person may be great, they may be wonderful, but like, is it really going to be what I want for my specific need?
Yeah.
Also, reading it through of like the profiles, like if it speaks to you, if their kind of written voice feels like it's collective, if it is, I graduated in 2020 with my master's degree in mental health counseling, I interned at that might be really helpful information. Doesn't really tell you anything about that human being and like if you want to spend time with them. So in terms of like when I keep saying fit of like finding the right fit of like is the vibe right? It's very vibes based of like are the vibes right? Is the energy right? Do we feel good? Are we interested in like conversing with this person? Because like it is a relationship. Do we want to connect with this person? Do we want to get to know them more? Do they seem lovely but maybe not the person for us? It is
Yeah.
about us and what we need in terms of our search. So like they all could be lovely and wonderful, but like who's going to really help us in the best way that we need help?
Emily, so much great information. I mean, so much great information. Because even like when I looked at your website, I could tell even before talking to you face to face, like just off your website, I want to talk to her.
Mhm.
I want to talk to her. I have to meet her. Just off your website alone. So I totally understand exactly what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. Okay. What do you say to the person who wants to start therapy or may even be in therapy, but is guarded because they've been raised with the mindset you don't share our business with anyone outside of our home or our family?
Gotcha. Do not air the dirty laundry. Why
Mm-mm.
don't show your underwear to anybody? Have clean underwear before you leave the house because those firefighters that come and get you in the car crash can't know you wear underwear. How dare? Um, Excellent point though of like even if we're in therapy or we're starting it, of like still having those like messages get ingrained in us, right?
Yeah,
So if we were raised in an environment or raised in a family system where it was like, don't talk about our stuff, it doesn't leave
yeah,
the house. I don't care
yeah,
who asks, I don't care who says, I don't care what school project it is, it don't leave this room.
yes,
That message sticks with us. So it's not like, woohoo, I turned 18 and all of a sudden everything I've been told my whole life disappears and I'm my own adult now and I get to determine what I think. That
Yeah.
would be magical if that happened, but
Yeah.
sometimes we have to like pick through all of these messages that we internalized. So if one of those messages is like, do not share family unit, like family secrets must stay within the family. Some piece of that is like, what is that message serving for us? How is it helping or harming us? And sometimes we find great comfort in that of like, I don't want people to know, I don't want people to be, this is my stuff. They're not open to that. In some ways, it can be constricting. It goes back to that vulnerability piece of like, if someone can see me at my like spikiest, grossest, unlovableness, they're going to reject me. They're going to not want me. So the message of like, don't tell anyone that you have this. Don't tell anyone that you need help. Don't tell anyone that this happened. It's reinforcing that, like, keep those barriers up, keep that armor on. In some ways, that armor can be helpful for us. That armor is needed at times. In other ways, are we something that we need to let it down, or that we looking for something else? We're looking for growth. We're looking for some exposure of that vulnerability that we feel comfortable with, of kind of testing the waters with that, of like, can we let a piece of it down? Can we let some of it in? And then just reflecting of like, how that message supports or harms us and how open we are to engaging with it. So sometimes we can be like, yes, this is a harmful message. I don't want to be like this and I don't want to repeat these patterns and I want to be a totally different person, but I also don't want to do anything about it in the recent future. That is a valid place to be. Like, and also that we have acknowledgement of that, that's huge progress just on its
Yeah.
own. Like, that is something worthy of acknowledgement and praise. The steps of doing something about it, that can be further on down the line. But just if we get to like, I'm not sure about this, or that like this is super comforting to me. Either way, that we're having some reflection, insight, and awareness around it.
Okay. And I'm sure what you just said is going to free up a lot of people that are listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because hearing that the fact that you are acknowledging it, even if you haven't made any steps toward doing anything yet about it, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's going to free up a lot of people.
I talk with people
Okay.
sometimes like action steps are overrated, of like, you don't have to go straight into action mode. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes thinking about it counts.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, there's a thing of like, we're as sick as our secrets. I don't fully love that, because it's like sometimes we need things on our own, or like we're processing things internally. Like, if we let everything, like, if you're making a new plant and it's a little baby seedling and it's just growing its first two leaves, if you leave it out in the sun and don't water it, it's going to shrivel up. So
Yeah.
like, until we have all of the like resources and structures and skills in place, that like we're a big beautiful plant and we can be outside and we can handle all the thunderstorms and the winds and the whatever, like, we're ready to do that. But if we're like, cool, I'm going to let everyone know all the things about me. I'm going to trauma dump all the horrible things that have happened to me my entire life to the grocery clerk at the grocery store. Like,
Mhm.
open honesty without any like supports or without any like mediation is also might not be our helpful answer too.
That's good. That's good right there. That's real good. Okay, so now I want to talk about enmeshment,
Mm-hmm.
codependency, and not having healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen to one's mental health in these type of relationships, whether with family or romantic partner? What are some early signs, especially with you specializing in with teens and young adults? Like, can you notice this early?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, good one. Enmeshment and codependency are biggies. Um, Sometimes too, like the codependency dynamics come internally. So they also can be connected to like attachment styles, right? So like
Okay.
if we think that we ourselves are like inherently unlovable, but we're always seeking someone to love us, that can be
Mm,
really informative to a codependent dynamic, because like
okay.
no one's going to love us as we are expecting because we're inherently unlovable. So like then all the things when you're looking from the outside of a codependent dynamic and be like, what are you doing? Or like, or you're hearing about it in a friend group and you're like, girl, chill out. But it's because it's like, I have this insatiable drive for this to happen, but it can't ever happen because I'm not worthy of this. No one can accept me of this way. This also can happen with enmeshment, and that like, I found someone who will accept me. Are they fully accepting me in my like most strong, authentic, like self-directed form? Maybe not. Are they accepting me in some way that I feel like I am unknowable and unlovable, but they're sticking around anyway? I can't ever let them leave. They can't ever go away because that means that I'm really unlovable. I can't ever stand on my own because I'm not meant to stand on my own. I can only stand with this person being next to me or being with me or being inside me. So you can see how those all those dynamics talk to each other. So the pieces of that is like it comes from an internal thing that we're like not going to get the support with externally, but we're always seeking for it through those external supports. So some of the reflection or work we do with like codependency and enmeshment is like kind of strengthening that internal dynamic and sense of self, also getting to those like root key things of like where did we hear that we were unlovable? Where did we learn that we weren't okay? What would it look like for us to be acceptable? We don't have to be lovable for us to just be like enough. That might be terrifying and overwhelming and have no answer to it. But like the process has to happen internally because like even if we get all the external validation and we get the most supportive person, they're not going to fill that need because it is inherently unfillable as it's like determined internally. So that's some of the like dynamic context around what's going on with that. Some warning signs that we can look out for is just kind of like those messagings of like, I can only exist if he's around. Some of the limerence that happens. So, like, not the love, but the kind of infatuation piece of like, my world is over unless he texts me back. He texted me back. Everything's great. And butterflies and rainbows and unicorns. I can't do anything. I can't focus on anything. I wonder what he's doing right now. I need to text him every minute for the next 20 minutes. So, like, you see how that sets up an impossible thing of like, even if he does respond, like, it still is not giving the stability or the validation that we're seeking in the same way. So, kind of those warning signs. Also, too, of like how we are discussing ourselves or how we are viewing ourselves in relationships. So, kind of the messaging around that of like, we have a really hard time with boundary setting or limit setting. Because if I set a limit, they might abandon. They might not want it. I can't ever tell them no because that means that they're going to go away. Telling someone no is a huge part of a relationship. If we say yes all the time, then like, oh, that's no fun. And then also like, how are we getting our needs met if we're just like,
Right.
yes, I'll do whatever. Also, the thing is like, we might be saying yes, and a piece of us might internally be being like, ugh, resentment, ugh, gross. Why do I always have to do this? I do all these things for you that no one asked. But how dare you not love the things that I did for you, but no one asked for them to do? So the warning signs of just being awareness of that, and then like awareness of kind of um, how people are talking about themselves, how people are viewing themselves, how the relationship is being viewed or like played out, how we're engaging in support systems. A lot of time, codependency, there's a lot of isolation because sometimes when there's reflection of like, is this the best thing? Or like, I'm not sure about this. Well, you don't understand it. We don't get it. We just can't support our love versus like, hey, everyone can support the love, but the love is like two balances coming together instead of two halves of a whole because everyone deserves to be a whole person, not just like a half on their own. Warning signs or things to look out for in terms of teens. This happens a lot with teens, depending on the spectrum of like full blown codependency, but like when we are starting out with relationships, when we're having our first romantic relationships, when we are trying things, when we are kind of experimenting with what we want. Sometimes the I don't like that, I don't want that, this isn't cool with me, that's really hard to say. That can be hard to recognize internally, that can be hard to verbalize too. Sometimes too, if we get partners who can not be the greatest dynamic fit with that, so can kind of prey on that and be like, no one loves you, no one likes you, you're not going to get anyone like me. Well, that's feeding into that messaging. And then it's harder to have like a healthy, solid relationship when it's like, well, they're telling me all these things and they love me, so it must be true. So I just need to be better because they love me and they're telling me that I suck at this and I can only improve through this way. So the things to look out for in terms of like support system with that is like how the partners interact, the communication around it, kind of like frequency, intensity of communication. Sometimes in the codependent dynamics, there's a lot of like drama just because it needs to be like heightened at all times. So there could be a lot of suicidal statements. There could be a lot of self-harm. There could be a lot of suicide, not suicide, but well, suicidal statements, self-harm, substance use is what I was trying to go for, of like lots of things happening. There can be a lot of like infidelity or even just like emotional kind of connecting of like, I'm not talking to you, I'm putting you on mute, but I'm going to talk to all these other people. Well, I'm not responding to you, but I'm going to be on track team for the next 3 days and do this stuff. So like that's going to rev up all of those dynamics. So kind of just like looking out for those things and then having the open communication of like that not your boyfriend sucks and you need to break up with him immediately. Who has ever responded positively to that kind of messaging or like followed through on that? But more of like, hey, how's it going? Tell me about this relationship. What are they into? Oh, what kind of stuff do you like doing? What stuff does he like about you? What do you like about them? Or all that kind of things of just like being kind of connected to the relationship and how it's going and how the teen or person is showing up in the relationship.
Got you. Oh wow. I just learned a lot. I
I was
just
like, was that
learned
more
a
than you need
lot.
to know about codependency?
No,
There's
that's
some people.
I wanted to know all of that. I had no
Mhm.
idea. I had no idea of all of that.
It's hard too, because like in the media, people just display, people portray codependency as like crazy lady or like single white female or like crazy stuff. And it's like, that's not a super helpful depiction because it doesn't include all of the context. It also
Yeah.
doesn't include like a path for like repair or growth or healing around it. Just because we're super codependent doesn't mean we're going to be that way for the rest of our lives. Some of us, if we choose to, like that's our choice. We're our own humans. We can do what we want. But that like some of us, if it's not like this death sentence of like, I'm stuck with this forever. It's just how we engage with dynamics and how we engage with like ourselves as we show up in relationships. That is always going to have area for growth.
Yeah. And I appreciate it just like any other thing that we deal with, the to know why. That's I always like to know why, because it's
Mhm.
always a reason why we are the way that we are. Like you just said, is because they see themselves as unlovable. That helped me a lot. Like
Mhm.
to know that, because if you just see somebody as what they're doing, you won't give them grace. All you see is what they're doing, but why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they acting that way? Like, but to see somebody as they don't see themselves as lovable, that helps you look at somebody completely different, just
Totally.
like anything else. So thank you for that. I needed that. I appreciate that explanation. It helped me.
Excellent.
My last question before we close out:
Mhm.
what advice would you offer the person who wants to try therapy and can't afford it or doesn't have insurance? What options do they have for support and to take care of their mental health or their mental well-being? Like, what options are out there for them?
Right, totally. And because we live in like a capitalist hellscape where it's like, healthcare is a hot mess. And not
Yes.
everyone has access through insurance or through employer and blah, blah, blah. So, a couple options. First thing is like you might see on some therapists things like sliding scale or reduced fee. Sometimes I tell people like it's it can always be an option to ask of like, hey, you're a really good fit for me. Do you have any reduced fee or sliding scale? Kind of mean a similar thing. Openings. Would you be able to work with a sliding scale? So that is dependent on each therapist, but like sometimes most of us have like limited openings in our schedule for like a reduced rate thing. So it could be, kind of dependent on what everyone needs and what everyone is willing to do, but like not through an insurance, not like a $200 an hour thing, but like something that is much less of like to get the support needed. So that's the first thing is like can always ask that of any therapist. The other option is openpath.com. They offer reduced therapy. I think it's $40 to $70 a session. So I think it's like a one-time lifetime subscription fee. They're a nonprofit, so it's not like BetterHelp where you like sign up for it forever and then you're stuck and then they have your credit card. But it's more of like to make sure our website doesn't shut down. They like ask you to do that. But after that, like every session is going to be either $40 to $70 ish, which is pretty affordable in terms of like a therapy.
Yeah.
Most of them are licensed. I think they also have like student interns on there. So most of them are they're in their grad program. They're like finishing up the last semesters of their graduate program and need clinical hours.
Okay.
So That is usually around like $10 to $20 if they have any students. They're under the supervision of usually multiple people. They have like a school supervisor and a clinical supervisor. So like, yes, they're students, but most of the time they're not like fresh, shiny new. Like they have some experience. They're almost done with their grad program. They're just getting hours. That is an excellent option as well. So I think both of those options are available on OpenPath. The thing with the students or the interns, you also can ask a lot of group practices or just like any therapist of like, hey, I'm not able to afford it at this rate right now. A comfortable rate for me is like $20 a session. Do you know of anyone in the area or anyone that you know that would be able to do that rate or would be able to have offer availability with this limitation? That could be an option. And like most of the time we'll be able to connect to someone or find someone or give you at least a couple names. Some people too have really limited pro bono spots, so just like totally free therapy. Most of those are going to be through like community resources, like community area. Sometimes they're limited, sometimes each clinician will do them. But it's one of those of like, it's always helpful to ask. The worst that can happen is someone says no. But we're generally pretty like kind, helpful people for the most part. Some of us are snots, but that happens with everything. Of that, like, hey, I'm really looking for this. This is my limitation. Like, this is my budget for what I can do. What are my options? What can I do? That like they'll try to get you connected to something. But my main things are checking if the reduced fee sliding scale spots or openpath.com.
And is that PATH, Open Path?
Yeah.
Okay.
OPENPATH.
Okay.
And they have, I think in there, like some people do virtual and some people have in person. So same thing, like you can search by zip code. But it's one of those two, like part of our field is having access, right? So like it is a reality of our world that finances are stressful and money is limiting in a lot of ways. So that like having some access to free and reduced therapy or that like finances not being a major one more barrier to accessing treatment when needed.
You're right. You're right. And these are great resources. Thank you so much. I will make sure for my audience, I'll make sure the resources that Emily provided in the show notes so you guys will have access to this information. Emily, before you leave, how can my audience find you or follow you on social media?
Best place to find me is the website. It's Larkspur Therapy, LARKSPUR therapy.com. I'm also on Instagram, Larkspur_therapy. Right now, it's just pictures of flowers and like Taylor Swift quotes. I'll get it together one day, but like flowers are really pretty. So if you're looking for like immediate therapeutic guidance, you're just going to find flowers and like really bad Canva templates. But that's where you can find me on Instagram. But the best way to reach me is through the website. You can either shoot me an email through there or like contact me through the page.
Emily, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate you. Great information, great resources, great interview. You were amazing. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to me and speak to my audience. I mean, this was just everything. This was everything. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been great chatting with you.
Yes, thank you so much. To my audience, thank you guys for being here with me and Emily today. Remember, I love you, but God loves you so much more. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, everyone. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Follow me on Facebook at Demo with Mo. If you have any questions you would like answered here live on my podcast, email them to me at demowithmo@gmail.com. That's DEMOWITHMO@gmail.com.